What's up YouTube? It's Rico here, CEO of Specialization Asia, and I'm back with another one from the Specialization Asia vlog, of course Made in China podcast if you want to check it out. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to choose the right factory, not just the right factory, but the right factory for your business specifically. So for me, when it comes to dealing with clients, this is one of the biggest issues, biggest points of contention I would say I have sometimes with clients is like, I think this factory is most suitable for their business and their size and everything, and they want to work with this other factory, right? And I think the first thing that people always get mixed up is they think that the larger the factory, the better. It's not always the case. Like sometimes working with a very large factory means that, you know, they might be working with Disney or they might be working with Walmart, but it doesn't necessarily mean that one, they're making good quality products, and then two, that they value every single client, you know. So they might focus, if they're making, if 70% of their business comes from, let's say, 2 companies, and then the other 30% is a bunch of other smaller fishes, they're going to focus on the 2 big fishes. And even though they might have the best intentions when they take on your business, it's just the reality is if Walmart comes in with a PO for $5 million and they say, we need this done in the next 2 months, guess whose production is being pushed back? It's probably yours, right? Or guess who is going to have less people on their production line checking for quality control issues? Probably yours as well. So you really want to look at how big the factory is versus how big your orders are going to be. So I would say generally, like if you're working with a factory, you should ask them like, what is a big order to you? What is a medium-sized order? What is a small size order? And if your orders at the beginning are small, and then the orders that you think you're going to be making in a year are still small, you want to reconsider that. Maybe try to find a factory where maybe your test order is considered to be small, but an actual full-scale order from you would be medium to large for them. You know, and then that way you're going to have more leverage over the factory. They're going to value you as a client, and you're going to have more control over your production because the money that they're making from you is significant for them. Another big thing is location. Location is huge. Like I think this is something that people underestimate. China is gigantic, obviously. And then a big thing is a lot of times when factories say that they're based, let's say a factory says they're in Shanghai. They're not in Shanghai. They're somewhere close to Shanghai, but they put Shanghai in their name because it's easier for people to understand Shanghai than, you know, let's say Nantong, you know, or you know, some of the other surrounding cities in that area. So you have to remember that, like, you really want to find out where the location of your factory is, just so that you have that understanding, and then you also want to make sure that the factory is in a place that's accessible. So one, for when you send inspectors to go visit the factory, they need to be able to get there, and it shouldn't be too difficult to get there. And then two, also just from a logistics standpoint, if the factory doesn't have good roads around them, like there's a higher chance that there's gonna be issues when they're shipping the product and potential defects, right? So these are big things. You want to make sure that the location of your factory is on point and that you know where it is. I think the next thing as well is like production time and timelines. So if you are working with a big factory, like I mentioned before, sometimes they chart out their productions. We have a factory, for example, that charts out their productions 90 days in advance. So it doesn't matter what time of year that we order our product, it's going to be produced in 90 days. So what tends to happen in those situations is my client has to then chart out their orders 6 months, 8 months out in advance. And it can sometimes be inconvenient, especially if you're in a business where you're selling you pre-sell product and then you need it within a certain time frame, right? It's a little bit easier to chart out your productions when you're a bigger company and you've been working for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and you kind of know consistently what products you're going to need within a certain time frame. But that's something you have to figure out, is when you talk to your factories, like, what are their production times? Because just if they say 90 days, it doesn't actually take them 90 days to produce the product. It takes them 20 days or 25 days to produce the product. It takes them maybe 10 days to get the raw materials. The additional 60 days comes from them just having other productions in place. So you want to make sure that you understand the production times of the factory that you're working with, so that you can make sure that you get your product on time and you're not delayed, or at least you can plan out your production schedule in a better fashion. The next point is, I think, specialization and experience. So specialization, when you talk about specialization, this depends on what kind of business you're trying to launch. If you're trying to launch an original design product, right? Like something that you're designing, it's never been made before, you really want to find a factory that specializes. You don't want to find a factory that is working on 6-7 different product categories at the same time. Or you don't want to find a factory that's just like got their main product and then has 20 other products that they sell. You want to find a factory that's only focused on this type of product, whether it's, Bluetooth headphones, which is like they must be only making Bluetooth headphones, or accessories that are related to Bluetooth. You know what I mean? It should be really, really honed in. But if you are, let's say, on the FBA side of things, and you are, trying to scale out your business, and you really just need to private label a product, you might want to find a factory that has a product range, because then you have the option of ordering one product from them and then potentially in the future ordering multiple products from them. So that's where you have to figure it out for yourself, is how much does this factory specialize and how much experience do they have with your product. Again, when it comes to experience, the more experienced they are, the more likely they're going to be able to fix mistakes. If they're very familiar with the product, they'll be able to come up with solutions as they're going when it comes to the original design thing. Because with original design, you do need, every single time somebody makes a product from scratch, there's always going to be mistakes. It doesn't matter how good your design is, there's always going to be things that need to be adjusted. So you want to find a factory that has that specialization and experience. As you grow your business, even with FBA side of things, you do want to find a factory that's more experienced with that product, because it's just going to cut down on defects. If they're not focused on your product, then they're just going to be more likely to have mistakes. And then on top of that, if they're not focused on that specific product category and they're selling products in completely different categories, they're not going to help you expand your production line anyways, because your product line anyways, because they have so many other things that they're chasing. So you want to make sure that there's specialization and experience, and also try to avoid factories that are not only producing but also selling, because there's a ton of factories right now that are selling on Amazon. There are factories that sell locally. That's a little bit more normal. I don't think that should be, don't be too cautious about that, but definitely, like, you want to see, is this factory focused on trying to go direct to consumer. Another big factor with choosing a factory is certifications. So like, you need to know, as a buyer, you need to know what certifications you need for your product. So for example, if you're making toys and they're made from plastic and you're going to sell them in Europe, or you're going to sell them in the US and Canada, there's certain testing that needs to be done on those products for you to be allowed to sell them in the US and Canada. So for example, in Europe. So in Europe, there's CE, which is usually needs to actually be put on the product, the CE logo, and then put on the packaging as well. The packaging can work. And then that just certifies that you've met the European standards. You've done the testing, you've done, to check for toxic chemicals in the toy, or making sure that the toy doesn't have sharp edges and things like that. And then with the US is the ASTM, which is American Standards for Manufacturing. And the Canadian one sort of follows the same tenets as ASTM. And again, it's just toxic chemicals. You want to make sure that those kind of things are not present in the product. But you need to figure that out for yourself. There's different things for electronics. There's different things for anything with sort of batteries inside, like, not just anything that has a lithium battery inside, that has to have proper testing in order to import it, because of course there's been histories of lithium batteries exploding. So you want to make sure that you understand those things, and make sure that either find a factory that already has that certification in place, or a factory that's willing to help you go through that process. Maybe even share the cost, because it's not cheap. it's not cheap to get this kind of testing done, especially if you want to do it effectively. It could be at minimum, around $1,000 all the way up to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 depending on the product. And then the last thing I think is business philosophy. Like when I talk about business philosophy, this is going to be a key factor in how you grow your company with the factory. Are they the kind of factory that again is specialized and wants to expand the manufacturing and become better at manufacturing? Or are they trying to shift more into a direct to consumer business model? This is going to affect your business 5-6 years down the line if they're not really focused on making the product, or they're more focused on making the product for themselves. That means they're going to use the best resources, they're going to give themselves the best timeline, and your factory is going to become a competitor with you. Another thing is, in terms of business philosophy, like when it comes to quality control, if the factory is has the mindset of whatever they're doing is good enough, this chabudo mindset in Chinese, then whenever you have quality control issues, they're not gonna try to fix it. So you want to make sure that you're aligned business philosophy wise, and you can tell this stuff from even the initial communication. Like when you're asking certain questions, do they answer them? Do they come up with solutions? Are they more willing to conform to some of your suggestions at the beginning, or are they just kind of not answering questions and kind of being like, it's my way or the highway? Like if you feel that in the initial communications, initial negotiations, that's probably how your relationship is going to be moving forward with the factory. So I like to think about the business philosophy. If you do have a chance, sitting down with the managers and the bosses and see if they're aligned in their business philosophies. There's a lot of times I can pinpoint some of the main issues with a supplier when I talk to their sales team about certain things, and then I'll go and sit down with the management about certain things, and then I'll go sit down with the CEO or the general manager, as they like to call it. And the general manager is talking about how he wants to have a collaborative effort with his clients, and we want to grow together and be strong and all this stuff. And then the managers are all like, well, you know what, like we can't make decisions because the board has to, the GM has to sign off and everything. I'm not responsible for this. I can't negotiate with. But this is not how we do it with our previous clients. And then the sales team are like, I don't know what's going on. Like I need to talk to my management team, and it's like they can't. No one's making decisions, and then the decisions at the top are not necessarily being translated throughout the team. Or the salesperson is just like, I'm busy, and they don't reply to your messages. And it's like, yeah, you're the owner of the company wants things to be like this, but it's not being translated throughout the business. You want to pay attention to things like that, especially when you're talking about long-term relationships with the factories, because it does make a difference. When you've been working with a factory for a year plus, if you're having the same issues you're having a year ago, it's not fun. So you want to make sure that you're following all those steps. So again, make sure you're choosing the right factory for yourself. When we talk about that, we're talking about the size, the location, specialization, experience, business philosophy, certifications. Don't just think that the bigger the factory, the better, or the older the factory, the better. It's not necessarily the case. You really do have to figure out specifically if this factory is suitable for you and your business. Cheers.